not get enough sleep as it is. But we're about to start. It's 9.
Yeah, I think the UK has it worst this time because I'm 1 hour behind Europe, so it's 5 a.m. for me. But you're right, Europe can't complain. I think it was Lou Berger, did some analysis on relative time difference to IETF conference times, and it's easiest for Europe. I think it's hardest for West Coast US and places like Japan, where for one of the meetings it's a 16-hour time difference or something crazy.
Yes.
Anyway, shall we start?
Yes.
So, good evening, good morning, everybody. Welcome to session 1 of IETF 109. So this is raw, reliable and available wireless. Given it's a virtual conference, I am assuming people haven't just wandered into the wrong room by mistake. So you do intend to be here, and you are all very welcome. I will attempt to turn slides and see the screen at the same time. There we go. So as usual, this is an IETF meeting, which means it is covered by the note well. I'm hoping you have all read a note well before. If not, here is a short summary, the boilerplate text. If you wish more information, the IETF holds lots of information about the note well, and I suggest you go and find full information on it and check how it applies to you. Page 2, important note, this session is being recorded, so any comments you make will be held for posterity. This isn't a blame culture, it's actually for the education of those who couldn't make it. They get a chance to listen to this again during their normal working hours. So straight on to the Administrivia. We are using Meet Echo. Hopefully you are all using Meet Echo too, but I know some people are only listening to the audio stream and Jabber as well. So as we said before we started the session, we will be taking notes using CodiMD, which is the integrated Markdown-based collaborative editor. So Ethan has kindly said that he will happily type away, but it's a collaborative environment, so please, everyone, if you want to make sure your comments have been recorded correctly, please jump into CodiMD. The link is on the screen. It's also accessible through some useful shortcut in the Meet Echo UI itself, and please add extra comments. Correct your name is a common thing to do, because we all get overexcited and talk very fast. Also, there is Jabber, which is also matched into the Meet Echo UI, but some people are using other tools, so we will be monitoring the Jabber chat as well. I can see Alexandra Petrescu already has problems with URLs on the screen. That's because it's a PDF, I'm afraid, but the PDF materials are available as part of all the meeting tools. So you can find the links there afterwards. As usual, we have a mailing list because we are a working group, so that hopefully you're subscribed to that. If not, please do, for it's the correct place for IETF discussion as ever. And as I mentioned, the meeting materials are all available on the raw data tracker page, so you can find them there. So straight on to the agenda. Eve, okay. Do you want to take over at this point? Yeah.
Sure. We're in the middle of our intro. Hopefully it won't take too long, but to give you a sense of what's coming, we've got Pascal up first to talk first about the technologies draft, which was formally adopted between the last IETF and this one. And that will be followed by the architecture draft, which is getting fairly mature. So there'll be some discussion about how mature it is. We also adopted the use cases draft, which Carlos will give us a brief update on its status. Not a lot of changes there since the last time, but some of what's coming ahead or some of the issues that are open. Niels will report out the third of the drafts that was formally adopted at the last IETF, which is on the LDAX technology. And finally, Fabrice will report to us about the OAM draft, which between the last IETF and this one was, as recommended and agreed to by both the DebtNet Working Group and the RAW Working Group. It was split into its respective parts. But of course, given that the authors straddle both groups, there's harmonization between them. And we do have a little bit of extra padding, which of course we always need. So in fact, we have, I think, it says 10 minutes here, but we've got about 25 minutes to spare beyond what's listed here. So really kind of 35 minutes for discussion. Next slide, please.
There we go.
And if you were to look back at the milestones that were enumerated in the charter, the first of the milestones was to produce and adopt a use cases document. I think we're right on task for that. There was also a requirements draft that was mentioned in the charter, which has really been replaced by the technologies draft. And in fact, the requirements have become part of the use cases internet draft, and the technologies is kind of an overarching document, which we'll hear more about in the session. Our other milestones, if you look at what's coming up for, this month, we have stated that perhaps the use cases document draft would be ready to submit to IESG. We'll have some discussion about whether we think that is really the case or not. But additionally, we really should be discussing at this IETF whether the architecture framework document is almost there. I think we're close. December, we wanted to submit that technologies draft to the IESG. And again, I think after we hear from Pascal, we'll have a better sense of how some of the authors and you as audience members feel about its maturity to meet that goal to submit it in December. And, the thing that we're really headed towards as a working group is this draft, which would be the evaluation of all of the existing IETF technologies and a gap analysis. And, we really can't get to that until we have these three other documents completed. And so it appears at the moment that December was a little bit overambitious. But we're not far off. We're maybe, again, it depends on these three other documents that are kind of foundational documents around use cases, technologies, and architecture, as well as some of the other ones that actually aren't in these milestones that hopefully we will add to the milestones, and we can have some discussions about when would be appropriate timeframes to tie ourselves, or at least project that they should appear on this list. So, and then obviously these last couple of milestones are about the submission of these things to the IESG, and all of that is contingent on things getting mature enough. So, well, we will have some discussion about all of these, where we are. I would say that, just at 10,000 foot view, we're probably about 6 months away from, 4 to 6 months away from maybe the last document. And we'll just have to see how that plays out.
So can I just quickly jump in here as Rick again?
Please do.
One of the key steers we've been getting from the ADs is this is not a document writing working group. So the steer we're getting is please don't spend 2.5 years writing lovely, rich documents about the problem before we get to trying to solve some of the problems. So although we understand that it's important to define our use cases and really understand the gaps that are existing, and it is great to have these things documented, we don't want to spend many years producing lovely documents and nothing else. So we want to move on to proposing protocols to solve some of the problems, but of course we do understand that we have to define the problems. Hence, these milestones are pretty, these dates are pretty tight. We're talking about September, November, December this year, and understand, obviously, COVID has made everything a bit more difficult, and of course, until you actually start breaking down these documents and understanding the problem space, you don't really have a good estimate of how long it's going to take. But we don't want to see these we don't want to be having this discussion this time next year with 2021 written where 2020 is written now, and still not actually have any of these documents finished. So that's my little 2 cents. Next slide.
Next slide.
Carry on, Eve. Unless you want me to cover this one.
Yeah, why don't you carry on?
Okay, so I'll just jump back one slide. As you can see that there is a charter item to say that there should be, it's the fourth one down, that there's in November, the working group adoption of architecture framework aspects for a wireless network document. So, of course, the charter is written as the working group forms, so it's the view from March, April, or whenever it was this year, rather than current understanding. So Pascal has got an individual draft talking about architecture and framework aspects. So my question really to him, and I'll let, these are questions really to have after various presentations, particularly on this draft, is this document proposed for working group adoption? And equally, if so, does the working group consider it ready? So this is something I'd like people to consider while they listen to Pascal talk about his work, because of course it's currently an individual draft. And my other second point is, while I was putting these slides together, we've got a couple of other individual drafts, which is great. Question to the individual draft authors are they still active? Are they looking to get these things adopted, or were these proof of concepts and the working group was quite a good place just to get some review and feedback? So some open questions. With my chair hat on, personally speaking, I think it's great that people put forwards individual drafts. Here are some concepts. It's a great forum to get some feedback, and I'd really like it to continue to be. And I quite understand sometimes, having put a bit of work in, you realize, nah, this is a dead end, don't worry about it. And that's fine, we can let these documents drop off. But equally, as chairs, if these individual drafts are going in, are people interested in getting them adopted? Is it valid for the working group? So that's another consideration there about draft adoption. And the other slide I've got is about draft submission. So as Eve covered in the charter milestones, we've got some fairly aspirational dates for getting the use cases and the technologies documents off to the IESG for review and formal sign-off pretty quickly. So this is a question really to the authors and, of course, to the working group. Let's not go to the IESG until we think it's ready. So the question is, do we think it's ready? And that's an open question and something to think about during the presentations coming up, and perhaps something we can discuss at the mic and on the mailing list after this session. Okay, so that's it from me. Eve, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's fine. Carlos, it looks like you're in the queue. Did you want to say something?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to comment on or to respond to Rick's questions on 2 slides before on one of the individual drafts, the RAW-MEC one. So this is active. I didn't ask for presentation this time because I want to do another iteration before. But
sure.
Hopefully, the next IETF I will be asking agenda time, and if possible, I will be presenting this. So just to communicate that there is active.
Okay, that's great. I just wanted to make sure equally that as chairs we weren't just ignoring these individual drafts, and we were making sure that you had the time that you needed to do it. Okay, so that's good. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, so I can only show slides and not see Meet Echo at the same time, which is a bit annoying. So it's Pascal first, I believe.
Yes, Pascal is first, and I think you have to stop sharing so that he can share.
Okay, if I have his slides as backup, if they don't work, Pascal. I will stop screen. How's that? Pascal, do you have to...
Are you there, Pascal? You may have to unmute your mic.
We've lost Pascal temporarily. Oh no, he's just gone to the back of the queue.
Okay, let's see if he can get back on, and then if not,
Hello.
Yeah.
he's back.
Hello, Pascal.
Oh, we can hear you now. Great.
Yeah, I had to leave Mitico and come back. I mean,
Oof.
it was there. I was hearing you, but when I wanted to speak, and then I lost the button which allows me to share. So which one is it?
Okay, I think you have to join the queue first.
Oh, okay.
Oh no, I've joined the queue myself. That's no good.
So you know what?
there's
Can you present my slides? It's going to be okay.
Sure.
I don't have many of them.
Sure, much
Try to
easier.
get
Sometimes
used
it's
to how we
easier.
do things here.
For reference, I think you have to put your hand up symbol, which means joining the queue. I will publish my
I
screen,
do that. Screen
and
share.
then I think you can request to share your screen. Next to the hand button, there is a publish screen button.
I'm still in queue for I can see.
Okay, I can see you in the queue.
Maybe you have to admit me. I mean, this tool is interesting. I forgot we used to. Oh, there is a screen queue. So now I'm
There
in
we
screen
go. Grant screen. I can now say,
yes.
voila, you should be sharing your screen now.
So yeah, let me try.
If not, I can do it, but I think it's worth trying to
there
make
it
this
is.
work once.
Terrific.
Are you on it?
Yes, we see it.
I don't yet,
So
but that's me.
let's fly. So
Although
yes,
you can put it in full screen if you can.
I'm in full screen now. But I have a single
it looks
screen.
like-
I put.
1 second. I can't see the screen. Can anyone else see Pascal's screen? Just
Yes.
I tell you what.
Yeah.
Shall I share? If it seemed to work for me, then I'll share Pascal's slides and Pascal.
Well, I can
talk.
make it almost full screen by
Okay.
reducing the wasted piece. Now we are there. But
Okay.
yes, I mean, I projected it and it wouldn't show the projected thing. But here we go. It's almost there, right? It's mostly
Yeah.
okay.
Good fake.
So yes, thank you. If you introduced it, and yes, we published as 00. So there are not big news for this draft since we introduced the 5G text last time. So for newcomers, I'm just a quick reminder of what this document is. So basically, this document illustrates the progress that has been done on a collection of radio technologies, and that includes Wi-Fi 6 and 7, which is upcoming. 15.4 TSCH, that's where 6-dish plays. 5G, now that we have the new section by Janosch. And LDAX, which will be also discussed separately during this meeting, which is air-to-ground and air-to-air communication for planes. So all those technologies have a very interesting feature that they can be scheduled, meaning that you can reserve bandwidth for critical flows and ensure a degree of reliability and possibly guarantee latency. It's not always the case, but you can provide some latency guarantees based on scheduling. So with this, we feel that we can actually build at layer 3 the reliable and viable services that RAW is promising. So that's why we present those technologies. And in particular, we focus on the special qualities that those new radios have that will enable RAW over them. So the document was adopted, it's published as a draft IETF. And well, we did work quite a bit as a personal submission, and you find there are many authors. So it was a mini work group document before it was officially one. I mean, there was enough people, like a quorum of people working on this document. So yes, as Yves said, it's already pretty ready. The big question to the group, and it's going to be on the next slide, is do we have the exact structure that the group wants? Because what it's all about is providing a structure which illustrates what the technology is, what the documents come from. You know, we want to make sure that there are open standards, blah, because the IETF doesn't want to work on proprietary stuff. Then we want to make sure that people realize the generic possibilities of those radios, like things like range, throughput, blah. And then we have this very important section for us, which is how well suited this technology is for RAW. So we have those three main sections, and they have been there since the inception of this document. Now, 5G came last, and as you can see on the right, I have put the structure of the 5G section, and you find that 5G has introduced this section 6.3, which is not in the general framework that the other section have followed, about deployment and spectrum. Personally, as editor, I really love that section and I find it useful. I was wondering if we want strict equality on all sections, in which case we would ask the authors of the individual section of technologies to provide a similar section, something like 6.3. So that's basically the big question I have for the group today and over the mailing list. Now, if somebody sees that there is yet another section that's missing, then it's time to speak. And then we'll go through the editors of every section and ask them to produce this particular section. So question one is, yes, this section 6.3, deployment spectrum, is that a good subsection to add to every technology? And I would like people to speak up. I don't see the queue. I hope you can still hear me. I'm still live.
Yes, we can hear you, and I can see the queue. And how am I supposed to? I can see that you're at the helm of the queue, Pascal, but so is Lou. Lou, yes, why don't you go ahead?
Let me remove myself from the queue because I was there just to get the presentation.
Hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Lou. Go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to respond to the question about missing sections. And it's really a question of where this shows up. Is there a place where relevant IETF technologies show up?
Here we are not talking about IETF technologies. It's really on the radios themselves. It would be another document, Lou.
Right, and in fact, if I'm not mistaken, Pascal, that gets discussed in the architecture document.
Well, yes, right now there is a little section on the architecture, which could be improved, but that's going to be the next discussion. Improve or separated or blah, blah, right? But Lou, just to your answer, this is just about the radio technologies. Sorry, if it wasn't clear. So it's background.
Was there any more comment on that, Lou? No. Okay.
Have I muted myself? Can anyone hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Oh, perfect. I was going to say, just for clarification, there's a charter item to do that exact analysis, Lou, for IETF technologies. From my understanding, this document is more about the link layer technologies and their capabilities. And I know it's not pure link layer technologies, but the radio tech and what is the art of the possible. There is a second piece where we look at LDP, DLEP, BFD, etc., which is alluded to in the architecture document, which talks about IETF protocols.
And then in the milestone discussion, I kind of pointed out that there is this gap analysis document, which will have a more full-fledged version of that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lou, if you've got a second point.
Well, I lost audio there. I don't know what happened. Yeah, thanks. I think you answered it actually, which is it's not this document. It's not the architecture document. So I went looking for it in the architecture and didn't see it either. No. You're going to put it in a gap analysis. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no trouble.
But there is a little section somewhere in the architecture document, I think. Yeah.
It is, but it's not substantive.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Oh, the little reload. So I have a personal comment to answer Pascal's question about, do we have to have the same subsections for every technology? My personal view is no. If it's important and it helps to explain the capabilities of the technology, for example, 5G, I believe it is important, then sure, have a section. If it's not so important for the technology, I don't think we need to fight for symmetry. Say, oh, there you are missing this subsection with this particular title. I think we will spend more time crafting the document and add words which have very little function. So I don't really care about balance as long as the content has value. Does that help?
As a general comment, it really helps. Now, on the specific of deployment and spectrum, I mean, for Wi-Fi, we all know, right? Now, for Wi-Fi 6, especially, it could be interesting to have some clues, to give the group some information about how well Wi-Fi 6 is faring these days. Does it really deploy quickly, and can we expect to get some services, widespread services? And spectrum, there's also a very interesting story to be told, because there is a huge fight for spectrum for some of those technologies. Again, I'm thinking about Wi-Fi, the 6 gig is being granted, and there's more. So maybe we could ask the Wi-Fi people at least to give us a 6.3 section. LDAX, I would be curious as well to have, something which tells us about what the, future, the projections are for deployment, and then is there a chance to get more spectrum and more bandwidth in the future? Blah. I mean, that could also be interesting. So I understand your general comment, and I agree with it. But still, I really like this 6.3 section that the 5G guys have given us.
Okay. Anyone else have any comment?
And it looks like Niels is saying that he can add that to the LDAX draft as well.
I think there's something to be said for, given LDAX has a draft this is me with my chair hat on now, LDAX has a draft in the working group. It's probably easier to add that as a section to LDAX, as Niels suggests, rather than duplicating the text or having the text living in two different documents. But there's also a Jabber comment from Alexandra Petrescu saying, as 5G gets deployed, I don't hear news of 5G features about QoS. I might be wrong. How about talking about 6G as well? I am not a 5G expert. Is there someone who wishes to step to the mic to respond?
As Alex says, there is already a 6G discussion list at the IETF. So if someone wants to talk to Janos and see if they can work together on adding some 6G int, we already mentioned BE in Wi-Fi. It's I think projecting for the future, which is like a near future. It's not like in 20 years. Is of interest. So I would be happy to see some 6G text as well, just to tell us where 6G is going in terms of determinism, how it builds on 5G and what it improves. That would be very neat.
So jumping the queue slightly myself, Rick again. I have a question about legacy technologies. So from my last reading of the document, there's a lot of content about new technologies with capabilities that are applicable. There doesn't seem to be a lot of information about existing or latency legacy technologies that and how to manage some of that. Do you think that's out of scope for this document?
Well, when we scoped the document, Rick, we looked at technologies that can be scheduled. It looked like the common point on technologies that we would cover, because we wanted to see if we could push them into bounded latency.
Okay.
And so we didn't try too much incorporating, the humongous amount of non-deterministic radios that are around here.
Yeah. Okay. So that might be another work item for the group to as we mature our proposed solutions to these things. And I spot Chunshan in the queue to produce a document saying, for some of these legacy technologies, here are some workarounds, etc., that may work. Go ahead, Chunshan.
You may have to unmute your mic right below your name at the top.
There we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm working in 5G in 3PP. I have one question for the 5G. Now we have the dedicated spectrum to support the 5G. Also for the 5G, they has support Wi-Fi, even satellite as a access technology. I don't know whether we need to still consideration this feature. This the 5G can also all kind of access technology, even for the WLAN technology.
Thank you. Pascal, do you have a comment?
Well, no, I don't see. I mean, that's interesting information, but I'm not clear how it's actionable for this document. Maybe in the 5G section, say that actually 5G accepts a number of access technologies, and there is kind of a merge there, or I mean, what exactly is the suggestion?
Can I say more? Yeah, can I say more? Yeah, because there are two access, two different access available for the 5G. They can use multiple paths to improve the reliability and throughput. So our topic is reliability and available wireless. If there's a multiple paths is used, they can improve the mobility. The 5G support the mobility. They can improve the throughput. They can also improve the reliability. That's I want to say.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, we totally agree on this. I mean that's pretty much why we're here. And the architecture has a picture which shows exactly this, right? Wi-Fi on one stream and 5G on the other stream, pretty much. Now, for this document, which is just explaining the technologies, would you like to have a section which explains this work, like this integration of Wi-Fi and 5G? I'm not against, right? I'm just trying to understand.
Can I say more? Yeah, in the 5G, in the 5G, there's also have a feature, ultra reliability and low latency communication. They also use the second path to improve the reliability and throughput to download the latency. This means they use the multiple radio station to send or receive the data to improve the reliability. I don't know whether also this technology should be considered in the 5G part.
So can I step in with my chair hat on? What's important to remember is this is the IETF. So we are looking at engineering solutions between heterogeneous technologies. What I mean by that is 5G may have a solution which will cover increasing reliability between SATCOM systems, radio access networks, Wi-Fi technologies, all within the 5G technology space. And that will be great. Where the IETF's role comes in is when data leaves that bubble of technology and has to transition across to another network using different technology, but from our working group perspective, still needs those reliability assurances, those SLAs. So yes, I think there is a value in having some more words in the 5G section to say 5G is more than just radio access networks for handsets. It also has these other features to talk about Wi-Fi and SATCOM that people may not notice, which may well be useful for our further work and analysis to understand. But the point of the working group is not to duplicate what the 5G, the 3GPP LTE work is doing, but is to look at moving data from the good work that 3GPP are doing off to the work that IEEE are doing, or other existing legacy networks, or whatever. Is that clear, or am I just talking now?
I think what Rick is saying is that this document is trying to harmonize the coexistence of these various technologies. And that's going to be the focus, and that's why this technology draft is written the way it is, to lay the groundwork for that. So I'm watching the time. Pascal, you're eating into your next presentation. Does anyone else have any more comments on the technologies, or shall we move on to the architecture discussion? I think crack on, Pascal. There is, I'm just watching that there's some interesting stuff going on in the Jabber chat, but if you queue up your next presentation, Pascal, I'll just, I think there's just a discussion happening in Jabber. Did you have another slide, Pascal?
I don't even know if I can talk because.
Oh no, we hear you.
We hear
you. So let me check. I was actually preparing for the next slide. Well, for this one, the question was mostly do we want to discuss what's the path to adoption for this document? And basically, yes, I had another slide which asks if we are missing a topic, and Shushan maybe was telling us that there could be a little bit more in the 5G. And that's to be discussed with the 5G authors if they want to discuss a little bit more about the integration of Wi-Fi and 5G underneath, just to let us know that it exists. So the other question I had was if we want more on the prime statement piece, basically. But okay. I mean, the big question is, how do we proceed to our group last call? I don't see that we want to change the structure dramatically. I hear from this call that we're pretty much okay. And so the question is, what's the path to our group last call? Should we already ask for a reviewer or something to progress towards our group last call?
I think that's a great idea to ask for reviewers. Rick, were you going to say that as well?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. Carry on, Eve.
I personally would like to review it more officially, so I'm happy to step forward for that. Are there other people on the list? And everybody's audio, you don't have to even put yourself in the queue for us to hear your audio. So if you unmute your mic and you'd like to raise your hand.
We can do a hand raise. There is a hand raise tool in Meet Echo. We could try an experiment to see whether that works.
Let's do it.
I'm going to do it as a two-part. First, I'm going to have a show of hands to say who has read the document. And let me just make sure I get the right name for the document while I talk about this one. This is the technologies before I... a very quick thing. So you should see a little ping to say a show of hands has been requested.
And oh, right. So you have to click on the.
Yes, you can choose not to
Cool.
answer because you're not paying attention, or you can either be positive or negative. It's very IETF. It's not a bad system, actually. Okay, so we're looking at about 50-50 from those who've noticed that this, or have worked out how to make the tool work. Okay, that's fairly positive. I'm going to add another quick one now, which is who would Oh, enter doesn't work. There we go. So this is, are you willing to do a full review of the draft, i.e., you know, a review from typos to I don't understand this sentence to I think this section is in the wrong place, including I think we've forgotten all this technology, you know, as Chun-Shun said. I'm sorry, my pronunciation of Asian names is not good. But
And so I guess for Ethan's sake, since he is helping us with the notes, those of you who have raised your hand, who are willing to do that kind of thorough review, if you could speak up, let us know who you are, either verbally or in the chat, that would be great.
I'm also making the assumption that I'm watching the numbers on the show of hands, and the numbers are about the same as the people who said they had read it. So it sounds, I'm assuming the people who are offering to review are mostly the same people who have read it already. So yeah, so
Okay,
Carlos is offering on Jabber.
Yes, is saying, and Eve, and there are two other people. Who are you?
It's not critical. You don't need
Okay,
written
you can let us
permission from
know.
the chairs, but so please, yes, I think to answer Pascal's question, the next step is people please, it sounds like the authors think this document is getting pretty stable, so now is a great chance to have a deep review, and then we can make a decision about, is it ready for last call, depending on the feedback from reviewers. Sound good?
Sounds great. And it looks like in the Jabber that Adam Oh, Adam saved me from, tell us how to pronounce your name.
Whitaker.
Oh, Whitaker. No way.
Anyway.
It looks more complicated than it. Okay, thank you for that help.
Pascal, do you want to move on to the next presentation?
Make sure the audio works again.
Oh, sorry, we've got Russ. We've got Russ in the queue. Sorry, go ahead, Russ. If you can hear me.
My hand down and it won't seem to let me.
Oh,
No, okay,
yes,
okay.
I was having the same problem. You just have to click on that show of hands tool the second time and it toggles it away, but also and then click on the participant list.
Sorry, Russ, did you have a comment?
It was addressed by the last thing, so no.
Okay, right. So moving on, because I'm watching the time. Pascal, go ahead.
Yes, so this is about the architecture/framework document. Really, there are three documents in one because that's kind of for some things it's a placeholder. And one of the things that I would have loved to see today, or maybe over the mailing list later, is decide what stays in this document, what goes away, what serves as a seed for another document, etc. So the requirements are still pretty much the same, and it kind of boils down to the use cases document that Carlos has discussed, and we'll be discussing more. If we boil down everything we've seen so far, I mean, my current understanding and still personal submission is that we have two major use cases in the real world for what we are doing. One of them is a bit what Shusan was sorry, I can't pronounce your name, what was alluding to when it's done inside 5G, but that could be done at layer 3 as well, and that's what RAW is about, is using more than one access link and possibly of heterogeneous technologies to achieve a more reliable end-to-end transmission, in which case the assumption would be that the radio link is the one that is the most susceptible of loss. And so that's the one we want to protect by having redundancy, etc. With the hopeful thinking that the rest of the path has a more fixed and bounded latency, and whatever is behind, it's wired, maybe it's .NET, or maybe it's just good enough. And so we really care about what happens on the terminal equipment on the stay, and how the traffic is distributed over multiple links like this 5G and Wi-Fi, which are illustrated up there. So that's the first case. We protect radio access. Second case is more complex, is when we're part not of the host, but of the routing fabric. And in that case, what we try to do is build a complex path that we call a track across possibly a radio mesh. And so what we're interested in is monitor what goes inside this particular track, like the real-time operation of every link in that small, hopefully small track, and making a decision almost on a per packet basis, on a per few packet basis, to ensure the SLA of latency and reliability that we have for this flow. In this case, we introduced this concept of a PSE that we discussed since the inception of the group at the BOF, which would be a function deported from the PCE that computes this path, and that makes this short-term, almost instantaneous decision of how much of the redundancy is being used for this particular packet. So these are basically the two use cases which seem to boil down from the use cases documents and from what we've been talking about so far. So they are described in the architecture. It's more like the problem statement piece of the architecture document. And now if we miss some abstractions, some things we need to look at and solve in this working group, then clearly we need to know, because we need to add stuff to this section. Now, since last IETF, and sorry, it's not actually published, I can publish it today, but the document has been through a bit of reshuffling. It's not really a lot of new text. It's mostly yet another reorganization. We discussed it at the last IETF. We said, hey, this section and this section, they seem to relate to the problem statement. So now we have a section 2, which is the problem. And as Yves said, we initially had an item on problem statement, which is now kind of this section 2. So in the section 2, we give the terminology. So if we want to describe problem, we need to agree on terms. What do we mean by this? In particular, we need to agree on what reliability and availability means. So we go into some details about this. Now, we mentioned, as you can see on the right, the section 2.3. We go through the two use cases that I just presented. So the question to the group there is, obviously, did we miss like yet another important situation that we want to cover in this framework? And then there is this section 2.4 that Yves and Lou have been talking about, which is kind of yet another work item that we had, which is this positioning the existing work at the IETF and positioning, providing a gap analysis or something. So since we don't have any other document, I kind of use this as a placeholder. But I didn't get to write too much into it, and maybe I'm not even the right person to write into it. Now, the
point is also that maybe that would be a great place to solicit people's input, for people to have a look at it. If we think it's anemic. update.
Yeah, the door is open, always been. But if this goes,
Yeah.
if this becomes a workgroup document, then the workgroup will be entitled to do whatever it likes into this, right?
Yes.
I'm just not the right person, probably. I'm not an expert in DLEAP. I have some clues about .NET, but still, I mean, some other people could help a lot. We need text on OAM, and now we have authors which work in both RAW and .NET, so they could produce some text on OAM, etc. I mean, there's a lot that could be done for which I would not be the right author, and that's when at some point.
Sorry, Pascal, it's Rick. My suggestion would be that looking at this section 2.4, I think that's a document in its own right. I think it's a charter item to cover that, and yes, I probably am a DLEP expert, so I can certainly help put some of the text together for that. But I wonder whether in the architecture framework draft, the section 2 you have here should be much shorter and call out to the working group use cases document, the working group technologies document, and hopefully the forthcoming related work at the IETF document, and call out from here. So to say, this architecture framework is attempting to address the problems, the following problems as listed in this problem statement, or whatever. To do it as a reference rather than inserting all the text in here, I think it will make the document more manageable.
That's exactly what I'm asking. I mean, we're completely in agreement. The question is really this section 2. That's why I kind of structured things in those 3 blocks. Is could we take a block away, but then it needs to have a placeholder, and since there was none, so for now I just did it this way. But I'm completely happy to take some pieces off, and I just wanted to capture whatever I had to make sure it was written somewhere, because right now we don't have this other document. So if we agree that we should have a document on related work or a prime statement document, I'm not 100% sure we need a prime statement because we have the use cases, and we have this introduction section, and we if you look at it, section 2.3 is like 1 or 2 pages. Section 2.2, but I think it's kind of important. It has 2 or 3 pages. It's not huge.
Okay.
The 2.4 would become huge if it was done seriously. So I completely agree.
And that's why it should be done as its own document, and is a charter item.
So as soon as it's there, I mean, I'm happy to kind of replace that by a pointer and maybe a summary of what the other document does, and look at this, look at that. So that would be neat. So easy. For 2.2 and 2.3, they're not fat, are they?
No, and I think they have to, continuing, I think they have to be there because you have to scope this document, because the use cases document is general. And the technologies document and the requirements, they're quite general and quite broad, and you need to define them a bit more accurately in this document to say this framework applies to these use cases and these requirements served. So I think this is quite, as long as they're short, I think they're perfect. I think you have to have them.
Okay. So after that, and I never knew what to call framework exactly, but because framework for me is like all the context, all the base, but we don't have a clear definition of what framework is. So I gave all the background information in that section 3 now. So as you see, the existing document is kind of repackaged into framework and architecture, and by framework here, I mean, yes, all the background, so explaining what the Pareo functions are, explaining what the tracks are, explaining what can be done at the PC timescale versus what we want to do here. That's what section 3 is now. And I called it framework, but you could call it background as well. And I'm open to any other name. And then the section 4 is what we have now for architecture. So we provided the model, which kind of inherits from the .NET model. We discussed the PSC, the section 4.2, and we discussed OAM, section 4.3. Then there's this discussion of flow identification versus path identification, which for which basically .NET has a provision which is not fully in line with what 6TiSCH is doing, because 6TiSCH has a flow identifier which is separated from the 5-tuple. So we try to kind of put that together. The key thing that we want to do here is to show that we kind of decouple the path indication from the flow indication. So if one wants to, multiple flows could be injected in one path, if you like, which enables us to have separate OAM packets which don't necessarily have the same 5-tuple or 6-tuple and still fly within the same track. So we have the track ID and we have the flow ID, which are kind of separate. Then we discuss how we do the forwarding decision, and there are basically the two usual methods. One of them is the source route, like the ingress of this track places everything in the packet so that all the nodes along the track will know what to do. So it's kind of, the segment routing, the source routing type of approach, but here it's going to be describing not a linear path A to B to C to D, but it's going to describe what happens on a two-dimensional graph. So like a directed cyclic graph. So there's some things, there are some things that need to be done to signal that, which don't exist at the IETF because source routing has always been serial. Then there's the discussion on encapsulation, decapsulation, and which kind of goes with the flow identification. And so that describes the track operation. It inherits a lot from 6TiSCH, and RAW, because there's a lot of work happening at RAW, and there are documents going through the ISG right now, which from which this document inherits as well. And then there are the usual security blah. So right now, so since the big change has been reshuffling the section, the feedback, I would like to see today or on the mailing list is about the structure. I mean, are we missing important topics? I already understand that 2.4 should go away, and I would be happy to see that happen as soon as the document shows up. That would change the text. For the framework, are there components that are missing? Same thing, or whatever should go there. And for the architecture, same thing. Did I do the right restructuring? Do we agree that what I call section 4, the architecture is really an architecture, is really what people expected from this document? Is there a big thing that's missing? Right now we have the OAM, the PSC, the flows. Is there anything else? And then, at some point I've done what I could, because that's the limit of those personal submissions. It's a few authors' mind. At some point we hit our limit, and that's when the working group should take over, because there are many more minds.
So it sounds like maybe a next step would be to, first, this particular version is not posted yet. So
no, it will be today if you like.
Yeah. Okay. But then you're really soliciting the feedback. And once we go through that phase, it's likely that we're one step closer to asking for adoption.
So Pascal, Rick here. I really want to read the new document. This is me speaking personally. I'm very happy to help on this, because I think this is actually a really key part of getting on with doing the raw work. So even if this document gets adopted by the working group and completely rewritten, it has to exist. So I am happily offering to help get it to the state where the working group is happy to adopt it. So I'm offering help here. The sooner we can get the latest draft out would be great. I think it's very important for the working group. This is now me with my chair hat on. Please, working group, read this document, because I think it has a lot of important, introduces a lot of important, framework is a good word, architecture is also a good word. It tries to set down a lot of the ideas that are being discussed informally in a formal manner. And if there are concepts that are not clear or are incorrect, this is the time to say. Because personally, I think this is the right approach. But the point of the working group is it's not just my opinion; it's everybody's opinion. So please read this.
Rick, two things.
Mm-hmm.
First one is send me your Git ID. I'm not sure the whole group is authorized on Git on this, but there's a Git, so that's yep. The easy piece. For the harder piece, work group adoption is not even a guarantee that the document will be shipped one day, but at least exactly. It gives the ownership. For me, that's the step where the group says, yes, this is serious work, and we want to take it over. And so, and to get those reviews that we're talking about, and to make the dates that we want, which are kind of aggressive, I think a work group last call, not work group last call, I'm sorry, a work group adoption call. Yeah, a work group adoption call would trigger those reviews that we are talking about.
So why don't we say that you post this and people read it, and we have some that we ask on the mailing list whether it's ready for adoption before any of those changes. That as is, do people feel like it should be adopted, because it is fairly mature, even if it has some of these pieces missing.
Go ahead, Lou.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me this time.
We can, you're a little quiet.
Okay, I'm now eating the microphone. I think, filling in some of these spots, or at least identifying where the gaps are, would be really helpful prior to adoption, because then we have an idea of what work is remaining and sort of what we're signing up to. Certainly, wouldn't expect the document to be so polished that we'd immediately go to last call. So, I understand there's going to be more work to be done, but at least flagging what that work is, I think would be helpful prior to the adoption call.
So, Lou, I would counter that by saying I think this document is critical to the working group. The document that describes what the working group is attempting to achieve to solve the problems as defined in the use cases. And therefore, I personally, rather than chair, think adopting a document of this type as soon as possible keeps the momentum in the working group.
Yeah, I completely support adopting as quickly as possible, which is why I'm saying let's flag the open issues. I'm happy to, on list, once this version is posted, put comments out there of anything that I think is missing. Obviously, you've flagged a couple things like the DLEP part. I think we're missing, how we tie into the rest of DetNet and normal traffic engineering and normal layering concepts. I'm happy to put that on, in email, and be more specific as what I think should be identified.
Okay, that's great, but I don't think that should prevent adoption.
And I think we differ here. I think if this doesn't show the direction we're headed, then personally I wouldn't support adoption without flagging those things.
Okay, so I have a suggestion with my chair hat on. How about the chairs? Pascal puts out the updated document as soon as he can, and 4 weeks after that, we have a call for adoption. So that gives everyone 4 weeks to read, review, and decide whether this is the correct direction for the working group to be taking its work, whether this document is, even if it's just even if it's far from perfect in a text sense, is the technology and approach correct? That would be my criteria for deciding. And after 4 weeks, we can make an adoption call. Does that work for Pascal? And does that work for the working group?
Well, since I was named, it certainly works. What also works is during those 4 weeks, Lou and you join the document and help to contribute those pieces that I've been missing. Because I pretty went as far as I knew. And for .NET, I could add a little bit, but for T and everything, I mean, if Lou would be so much better. So if the two of you can help on this document, during those 4 weeks, then we would have something a lot more mature to give to the group in 4 weeks.
Yeah, I'm
offering. I don't know if
so.
Lou can find the time to help us. Yeah.
Or another .NET LDP expert.
We need .NET, we need T,
Yeah.
So, I mean, Lou, I can't hear you anymore, but if you're willing to because you have a mind of what you want to see there. I mean, the best would be that actually you propose it.
Yeah, Lou, we don't know whether your silence is agreement, but we're not seeing anything.
Yes, that works for me. I'll send something to the list.
Sounds great. Okay.
New version, obviously. Thanks.
Thank you so much,
There
Pascal.
are two pieces. I'm sorry, Yves, I was not too clear what Lou told us. There are two pieces where we need work. One is this architecture document, where we probably want to see how this fits into the rest of the framework of the IETF, like what's TE, what's .NET. I have some text, a little bit of text about .NET. There's in the new text that will be published today, you will find positioning this work versus the data plane in .NET. But I'm sure Lou can do a lot better and improve it. Now, there's also discussion on how that fits with the existing tooling, like how would we play with DLIP, or how would we play with other things. And that has to be split between this new document that we don't have, for which I just have a placeholder, the gap analysis and blah, and the integration of those technologies into the architecture, which would be here. So we need all this. So I just want to make
You're right.
Placeholders to structure things and say this goes there, this goes there.
Okay.
Completely
Thanks
correct,
for clarifying that.
So, watching time, I think
We are ready.
Yeah. So,
for the
what do we got next? Niels.
We've got Carlos. No, it's Carlos.
Oh no, sorry, Carlos. I've miscounted. You carry on.
Carlos. And Carlos, are you good to present yourself?
He is now. I have granted his screen.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I was muted,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Carlos Bernardos, presenting on behalf of my co-authors of the use case draft. Today in this meeting, I just wanted to do a very brief presentation, just summarizing what we have and mostly requesting some help input from the working group. So currently we have 8 use cases in the document that are described. They are the same ones that were described in the previous iteration. Aeronautical communications, amusement parks, wireless for industrial applications, pro audio and video, wireless gaming, UAV platooning and control, edge robotics control, and emergencies. And for each of these 8 use cases, we have the following structure. Is basically the same for all, but for the first one that is just the use case description, I think is called motivation. So I need to basically modify that, but it's a very minor thing. So for each of them, we have initial description, motivation of the use case, in general, without going into all the raw details. Then we go into the specifics that are relevant for raw. The challenges that each of the use cases brings or poses regarding reliability and availability in wireless scenarios. Then a very short subsection on the need for wireless, which is pretty obvious in most of the cases, but still is there. And then the key section, in my opinion, for each of the use cases, that is the requirements. That, as the chairs mentioned before, these use cases is not only kind of filling the gap of documenting the use cases, but also trying to identify and enumerate the different requirements for the raw solutions that are required. So these are this is the current structure. And with that in mind, this is the key slide from my side. Now this is a working group document. So basically I'm here to request input from all of you. And I have a set of questions. Of course, there may be other questions that I missed. There may be other feedback that you want to provide, and that will be always welcome and very much appreciated. But from our side, these are the main questions that we have. First one, are the use cases relevant and representative? So do you think that we are missing any use case? Do you think that there are some use cases that are not representative enough for the raw scenarios? So this is a first question that we would like to get feedback on the mailing list. The second question is basically related to the former one. Are we missing anything that you think we should be documenting? Then, is the structure that I briefly presented before for each of the use cases appropriate? Do you think that maybe we need to remove some things, like maybe the need for wireless is too obvious and is not needed, or maybe you want to structure the requirements in a different way? Whatever you think it will help the document improve towards meeting its goal. And then the last question or questions is how we continue working into the document to evolve that into or getting into the final shape before working group last call. So for that, we have already started some informal discussion with the current authors of the architecture document. So that is not yet IETF, but when IETF document, working group document. So what do we need in the use cases to help then that document do its job? That's a key question that we have. So what should we cover that maybe is not properly covered or not covered at all yet in the use cases document? So those are the questions that we would like to get feedback from the working group to help us working into the next iteration, the next version. And that's it from my side. If Rick, I don't know,
well, one of the things that we had discussed amongst ourselves as chairs, co-chairs, was that so it does have a good collection of use cases there, and that to help it wend its way towards last call, probably we need to reach out to others in those areas, just to look at them for, to kind of answer your question about, are they representative and relevant? Are they not so much is there a use case missing, but are the ones that you have there, captured well enough? So that was one thought from a review standpoint.
Okay, that's a good point. So I'll try to contact people from each of the use case scenarios. People were involved for sure when we were doing it. For example, the last one that we added, the text was suggested by one guy that was working on the topic, but I will reach out to people on each of the use cases and ask for feedback. I will do that. Yes.
So, Carlos, I will extend your previous comment, which is this is a working group document. So, working group, please reach out to any subject matter experts you might know. So, if you work with someone who knows a lot about gaming at an internet scale? Could you ask them to look at the use cases on internet gaming? Same applies to, obviously I can reach out to some SMEs on UAV swarming, but can you just have a look at this document, review it, and if you think you know someone or are a subject matter expert on some of these, please have a good look. From my perspective, we don't need a huge drill down for every use case becoming, 100-page detailed essay about that use case. We just need to ensure that we are capturing relevant things and our assumptions are correct rather than incorrect. That's all. With my chair hat on, I think this is a good document. It's focused. Let's just get the reviews in and make sure that everyone in the working group is ready. So thank you very much for your work on this, Carlos, and the rest of the author team. Just checking Jabber because a couple of people. So Niels has offered to rework some of the aeronautical communications section in there. Alexandra Petrescu has mentioned about the UAV platooning use case. One of the use cases is the drone show using thousands of simultaneous flying drones. Yeah, but unfortunately these communicate only when on the ground. Do we know when these drones will communicate amongst them in flight? Okay, so without disappearing down a big UAV platooning discussion, the aeronautical use cases are extremely varied, from tiny devices flocking to commercial aircraft moving at continental scale to let's ignore the whole military environment. So yes, we could write a huge use case just about UAV, just about one particular detail of UAV swarming. So I think from my perspective, as long as we capture some of the general purpose text without spending a year working on this document, we'll have done the right thing. Pascal is in the queue. Go ahead, Pascal.
Yes, I just wanted to suggest maybe we need a link between those use cases which really show, here is where it applies, here is where it applies, and the architecture where we have basically selected two problems that we are solving, like the access and then the mesh. If there was a way to kind of glue those two, and I would see the conclusion of the use case document as trying to extract what's the common thing that we need to look at, and that would basically create that link with the architecture document.
I completely agree, Pascal. I think that also means a solid use cases document. So the architecture document could say, referring to the use cases, RFC, whatever it ends up being, section 2 and section 3, these are the use cases we will be addressing in this framework, means we can rechart a RAW in the future and address different use cases that are out of scope for what we're proposing now, and the next generation of smart IETF contributors can solve the suite of problems that we choose not to solve now. I think that's the correct way to do it.
Yes, and the use cases at some point need to be turned into something more abstract and more generic than this plane. So for instance, the need for multiple accesses at the same time, and that's the piece that I would like to see extracted, like abstracted to a level where we can take it over on the other side. Now we have two cases, two abstractions that we use, like the access and the mesh. Are there other abstractions in these documents that we are not capturing in the architecture, and then we decide whether we do capture them or not, and we do process them or not, or like you said, in the future we'll do that. But right now we just explain the cases, but that's not really turned into this abstraction of a problem at the access.
I agree.
Yeah, Pascal,
go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that. Basically, this is what I want to start turning the requirement section at the end. Try to really use that abstraction language. Let's call it that way, to be homogeneous and to make the link with the architecture. So I agree with that. So let us try to do a first iteration towards that direction, together with the other feedback that we can get in and input in the document, and then we can reach out to you guys and get some comments from your side, the architecture authors, and try to see whether the next version start going into the direction that you pointed out. I fully agree with that, Pascal.
That's perfect. And by the way, I just published the document as I promised, so it's available.
Yes, I saw.
We saw that. Thank you very much. Given the time, I think we're done, Carlos?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. I think next up is Nils.
LDAX with Niels.
Yes.
Oh, I must permit Niels to use the screen. There we go. Go ahead, Niels.
And you need to unmute. You need to turn on your mic as well.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, we hear you.
All right. Yeah, so I have the same problem as Pascal, but I think I hope you can see it okay for now. Yeah, so welcome and thanks for joining for the little update about our LDAX draft. So since last IETF, there were a couple of changes. So the last time we presented the version 04 of the pre-adopted draft, and now we got it adopted and already sent 5 updates. So we got a huge amount of feedback. So thank you a lot for all the comments, very valuable. And yeah, here's the node well. I think we covered that. Yeah, so this is now where we're at. Looks like that. And here are the changes that appeared. So I said before.
Oh, and you're definitely going to have to, yeah, we can't read it, which I guess is just as well.
Okay, that's not good.
It's very, very, very small. But don't worry, just speak to it. We'll figure it out.
Is that a little,
great.
Is that a little
oh,
better?
That was great. Yeah, that helped
okay,
some.
There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so the most important part is here you can see all the changes. So we added about 10 pages to the document, and we covered mostly the required language, so the requirement language. So we already changed all the IETF keywords. Then we extended the terminology because there is a huge amount of abbreviations, and yeah, terminology helps here. Then most important, because we got a very helpful comment, was what are the requirements to LDAX? So what is the ecosystem in which LDAX will have to be deployed? How does it look like? What are the characteristics of that ecosystem? So there are requirements to LDAX. So LDAX had to be developed with a certain mindset, so to speak, and we list them here. Then we went really deep about reliability and availability, and I'm going to cover this in this talk as well. And then lastly, security considerations. So we had to rework the entire security considerations page, and yeah, added a ton of stuff here because there were some recent updates regarding to that, and also because we had to cite from aeronautical sources. We included some of the tables found in the DO 350A, which tells about the requirements for CPDLC communication or ADSC communication. So aeronautical-based communication, what are the requirements for there? And since LDAX will probably be used to support these message formats, we had to have a look in there and also add that to the draft. So this is all what happened during the last months here, and let's go a little bit deeper in each section. First, Chapter 6, Requirements to LDAX. Yeah, what is the application area in general? Well, we want to have a data link that can communicate information related to the flight safety and regularity, meaning that whatever air traffic control message or air traffic services or aeronautical operational control or any other data that's relevant here for flight safety and regularity that's being sent over the link has to be taken into account. And there are some pretty severe requirements to that. As you mentioned before, message errors have to be taken care of so that you have a really high reliability. And yeah, requirements to LDACs also, the challenges are that because flying around the world is actually happening worldwide, guess what? And there's heavy regulation regarding to that, and also spectrum scarcity, because there is a regulated and dedicated spectrum available for aeronautical communications, for instance, here in the L-band. And the problem now is that we have a huge amount of legacy systems since the 30s, so 1930s, in that spectrum, and blocking opportunities for new systems to come in. For instance, here for LDACs, the most challenging thing was to get the communication system into a band where the distance measuring equipment, that's DME, are still sending out radio beacons with a magnitude more power than LDACs is able to communicate. So you had to work in between of those bursts, and that means that you have to be smart to actually get a little bit of spectrum there in order to send data. And yeah, that's because data links here in this environment may only use aviation license spectrum, and as I said before, it's pretty scarce now. Also, we have not enough bandwidth on terrestrial data links. So if you remember back in 1978, the first ACA system was designed for aeronautical communications with a use case in mind that crews on aircraft had to tell them whether they were airborne or not, so tell the ground, because they were paid differently. And for that system, ACAS was originally invented, covering 2.4 kilobits of data. In 90s, there were the VDL mode 2, so the VHF data link mode 2 was invented with 35 kbits of data. Now LDACs brings about 2.4 megabits to the table. So if you think about this evolution, we're getting there. Yeah, then because there's a ton of different non-avionic specific data links, obviously 4G, 5G, and all that stuff. But the problem is, for instance, 5G, you can't really use 5G because you have huge ranges to be covered, and 5G is not designed for huge ranges. 4G you could use, but the problem is that it's just designed with a different use case in mind, so it's really not applicable here. And also the security issues exist for those data links that way. And then for IETF, it's probably most important to remember that the aeronautical IP internetwork, so there are plans to integrate IP here into the internetwork, and the internet should be separated completely. So there shouldn't be an opportunity from the internet actually to access then the avionics-specific IP address range and simply put in some messages there. Then secondly, objective of LDACs, as we said, we wanted to replace legacy USI stack and proprietary ACAS, as I mentioned before, this ACAS technology, with industry standard IP technology, and provide a next generation terrestrial data link designed to support IP and provide a much higher bandwidth, as I said before. As of now, there's one other data link for terminal maneuvering areas and for airports that is already in use. That's Aeromax. And LDACs is then designed for continental en route traffic, so where planes actually cruise over continent. And this is now where we want to place LDACs. And then the requirements for LDACs is this terrestrial high throughput data link and the interoperability. Because first of all, the different new systems that are coming into this ecosystem, such as Aeromax, as I mentioned before, or satellite data links, or LDACs, they have to work as a multi-link technology. And the other interoperability is this ground network has to be connected, obviously, with the data link to the plane. All right, about reliability and availability. So that's chapter 8 now. As the development of LDACs started a couple of years ago, most of this stuff is not something new, but it's very important to remember because it tells about a very robust system design. So first we have OFDM-based frequency division duplex system. and it's deployed in this aeronautical communications restricted L-band, and we only have 500 kilohertz bandwidth, and this is also why we only have this 2.4 megabits top, because if you only have 500 kilohertz, it's pretty little you can do. I mean, if you have LTE 20 megahertz channels assigned, obviously the data rate could go way higher, but the problem is really the spectrum scarcity here. Then another thing, the guard times are set to be able to operate in a 200 nautical mile range. Forward link physical layer continuous, so that means if a ground station sends to an aircraft, then this ground station can send at any time, but if an aircraft actually wants to respond, it has to request resources in bursts and send data into bursts. And then the user data uses adaptive coding and modulation, so depending on the channel characteristics and the quality, more data can be sent, but control data is usually transmitted in the most robust coding and modulation. Then the MAC layer, so on the right-hand side, you see the frame structure. What we see here is a very fixed frame structure. So we have super frames of 240 milliseconds magnitude. We have a broadcast channel at the beginning of each forward link, so that ground stations can announce their existence into the world. And we have a random access channel in the reverse link where aircraft can request to join a cell. And in between, we have multi-frames, and at the bottom of the page, you can see the multi-frame is split into data frames, so that's the data channel DCH, and into two different control channels where resources can be requested and allocated. And with this static frame structure design, it's a very, very robust design, because you know when each pilot symbol will have to appear, you know the time synchronization rather well. And it's also important to remember that the entire resource management is handled by the ground station. So even if an LDAC cell is full, too many aircraft in a cell or something, it can request a handover. So the resource scheduling and management is entirely handled by the ground station. Moving on, we have the data link layer. We have an RRQ protocol for reliable data transmission layer 2 with a selective repeat RRQ with transparent fragmentation reassembly to the resource allocation size. With that, we can achieve low latency and low overhead without losing reliability. We also ensure the correct order of packet delivery. We exclude duplicates. We can identify lost fragments, and then and that's important, deterministic time missing to the medium access frame, and then initiate retransmission. Thus, we get fixed times of when we could expect retransmission to be done successfully. And we have a priority mechanism within LDACs that ensures that most important message arrive timely before a lower important message. Yeah, now moving on to the security considerations. I should have requested 20 minutes because it's a lot of updates. So the problem here is, as I mentioned before, ACUS was designed in 1978, and since then a lot has happened. And for instance, now we have software-defined radios. This year there was at DEF CON the Aerospace Village, where with a $300 device, it was shown how to do dubious stuff. And so this changed threat landscape is becoming more and more important, because, as I said before, there are open stack implementations of stuff on GitHub. We have software-defined radios nowadays. So if you want to attack communication for an aircraft, nowadays it's relatively easy. And so we have to take security very, very seriously. And we have to embed security features within LDACs already. We have to think about that we don't have too much bandwidth. So whatever we do, we shouldn't just basically fill the entire communication band with security data. And then we have another thing going on, and that's basically that the human as a control instance is going to be taken out gradually out of the loop. So meaning we have fully automatic flights, we have drones landing automatically and so on. We have 4D trajectories, so virtual points in the air that an aircraft can follow and so on. And all of these things have to be at least integrity protected, so that nobody can inject messages and so on. So strong cybersecurity measures are a must for LDACs to become adopted by the International Civil Aviation Organization. So here is the listing of LDAC security considerations. So it shall protect availability and continuity of service. It shall protect the integrity and authenticity of messages in transit. It should provide confidentiality of messages in transit. It's important to note that there's a should, because we have different messages on the link, and depending on whether it's privacy relevant or not, we need confidentiality, or sometimes it can even be a problem if that message has to appear, for instance, for all pilots in the vicinity, and everybody has to be able to read it, then it's only a should. Then should provide non-repudiation for necessary messages in transit. So if there's something that is very important and you shouldn't be able to repudiate from it, then you need it. Obviously, we have to have mutual authentication of communication entities, authorize the permitted actions of users and deny actions else. And we have to have a capability to prevent the propagation of intrusion. So if one LDAC link from one ground station to an aircraft has some problems, it shouldn't spread from there. And yeah, with that, we gave a very detailed, I think, a very detailed overview of the architectural details in section 10.5. Told about the LDAC entities for the security mode, and we talked about trust, about PKIs in that environment, about entity identification, about authentication, key negotiation, and then the message in transit, confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity. Then we moved on to how this would actually be deployed, and how different algorithms come into play and protocols. And yeah, we started again with the trust section. So we talked about, for instance, the Aeromex PKI, because there is currently the plan, as I said before, to integrate different aeronautical communications technology and the security behind them into one system. Then we have the identity management based on the aircraft identities. The problem here is each aircraft has a relatively unique ICAO address, but the problem is this 24-bit addresses have been cloned before already. So how do you actually identify an aircraft? Then certificates stored in the entities, allowing then mutual authentication key exchange procedures. And then we need to have a key derivation mechanism for perfect forward secrecy. That's probably more also based on the key exchange procedure, for instance, using the Diffie-Hellman here. And we have to protect user and control plane message and transit integrity and confidentiality. Most important actually is the control message, because if resource allocations don't happen anymore, somebody has successfully broken the system. So we have to be very careful in how to protect the control message part here. Yeah, and those were the major updates. So thanks from my side. Are there any questions? Shoot.
So, Rick here, just jumping in quickly, because the question has come up before on why are we handling this in RAW or the IETF. So the critical thing is actually on this slide. It's the LDACs is by the sound of it, I'm not an RF expert, a sensible proposal to keep aircraft-to-aircraft with the tower communications working successfully. The important thing I think that Niels mentioned is, at a certain point, these IP packets may not flow to the internet, but will be flowing to the ground segment and to other command and control systems existing on the ground using alternate technologies. But the reliability and the determinism of that complete end-to-end path is important. So although LDACs, the layer 1, layer 2 protocol, may be slightly out of scope for the IETF, the interaction between LDACs and the ground segment or alternate flying radio systems, I think is directly in scope for RAW. But I'm interested in others' opinion. Pascal, go ahead, you're in the queue.
I really love this picture, and thank you, Niels, for this great presentation. I was just wondering, do we have a case where, for instance, the plane on the top would use one or the two of the planes which are at a lower level here to relate to the tower? Do we ever mesh them? Or is it not something you've thought too deeply yet? Because RAW would also give you that.
Yeah, so I can answer that question real quick. What I presented now is the LDEX air-to-ground communication link because it's much more mature, but there's also currently this effort going on in ICAO, also at the German Aerospace Center, to have the system details of an LDEX air-to-air layer available, and then yes, something like an aircraft leaves the London airspace but wants to send a message to something in Washington, and then there's a huge mesh networks of aircraft relaying this message onto the final destination, Washington. This is going to happen, and so for that it just takes a little bit of time until the PHY layer and MEC layer procedures are clearly defined.
Can I add? Speaking personally, that use case is obviously being explored by various aeronautical companies. Again, not always happening at layer 2. So again, that's the use case for RAW. So you may get the aircraft-to-aircraft handover happening at the IP layer rather than at the link layer, for simple reasons that the aircraft may be carrying different manufacturers' radios, a number of different security domains, etc. Anyone else?
Speaking to myself.
You are speaking to yourself.
Yeah, I had muted myself. But thank you, and thank you for and the co-authors for iterating after the good feedback that you received. So we look forward to the next draft, and continuing to iterate. We have one more presentation, and I think because we've had so much good discussion, Fabrice, the floor is yours, and you have, we're coming up on the hour, but you have your 15 minutes and maybe a little wiggle room beyond that.
You may be
audio.
muted.
Unmute. Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, let's start. I will try to keep it short because we are short in time. So
well, no, you have your 15 minutes. So it's all there.
Yeah, but to let enough time for the discussion after that. So
yes.
After the presentation, I will just try to present what we updated in the draft. So basically, as a reminder, the version 2 was covering all the aspects of OAM, wireless, and database networks, and we have decided to split the document in the .NET version 0, so that's everything which is generic for .NET cases. And in the version 3, we try to focus only on the specific radio networks. And now we moved, hopefully, all the generic aspects to the .NET version. And now this RAW version is focused uniquely on wireless networks. So I will present shortly what we have done up to now. We've introduced the terminology section, trying to detach all what is expected, that's OAM, maintenance set point, active, passive, hybrid measurements, control on the data plane. So all what is generic enough to be put in the .NET paper draft. And here we focused on the control techniques that are used in RAW for wireless. So for instance, for piggybacking, because we have a very high medium access cost. So we piggyback some control information in normal packets about inbound and out-of-band monitoring. So without and in the control plane, but with the data packets or not. Route over, mesh under, and the defect and the difference with faults, temporary versus permanent faults. For one network, it has not changed a lot for the sections, which is specific to defining why WAR networks are specific. So that's the concept of a link abstraction that doesn't hold anymore in wireless networks, because we have link asymmetry, because we have some different characteristics and external interference. We define also that broadcast transmissions have an impact on the ROM plane, because we may use some other packets to infer something. And we also have a deep change in the forwarding process, since we may have complex layer 2 forwarding, such as Anycast or this kind of stuff. For the operation part, the objective of that is to keep the network up and running. So we have a connectivity verification. Basically, that's something which is quite common, but we have the specificity of Anycast that makes that the number of possibilities is increasing very fast. So we have different probabilities for each receiver, so that's very complicated. And actually, when we take a look at the route tracing, so identifying the route that has been used for a given packet, that is much more complicated, because we have a mesh topology, so we have multiple forwarders at each hop to increase the availability and the reliability. So that's much more complicated to trace all the possibilities. And the faults are very common in wireless, because we have link quality variations, we have obstacles. So that means that it has to be monitored properly continuously. For the administration, we have to keep track of the resources and how they are used. Actually, we have to define the metrics we have to collect. So we have plenty of different metrics to collect to be able to at least estimate the quality of each link and of each track. So such as the radio signal strength indicator, the packet ratio, the queue length, and it has to be monitored per radio channel, per router, per flow. So we have very large variability here, and so it has to be handled properly to limit the bandwidth consumption, because else we have a huge amount of control traffic to transmit, and sometimes the wireless networks have a low bit rate. So it has to be considered properly to compress the volume of data of information that has to be sent, so that it may be scalable and acceptable in this situation. And last part we have also modified quite slightly is the maintenance part, because we have to achieve predictive maintenance and reconfiguration in the network. So typically to adapt them to reach the reliability, high reliability in the control plane is quite complicated, because we have wireless networks, wireless links, so some packets may be lost. So we have to define a method and technique so that we can recover from this packet losses. So either end-to-end or hop by all transmissions, it has to be discussed properly. And we have also to take care of the dynamic behavior of the network. So because the network is changing continuously, so we have some faults which are just transient, and the network is well configured for this situation. However, for some long-term evolutions, we have to reconfigure the network to be able to cope with the novel conditions. So it has to be properly distinguished between what requires a change of the network configuration and what is a legal change, because that's just a temporary variation of a link quality, for instance. So the next step is what we have achieved up to now. Do we have some missing points in our documents? Do you have some critiques, suggestions from the working group? So we are any suggestion, contribution is welcome. And last but not least also, should we have a working group adoption for this draft or not? Is it of interest for a working group? So that's the open question from myself and from the authors.
Thank you very much. So I'm just checking our charter a second, because I think OAM is a charter item. So your working group adoption call is valid. Let me just, I've got lost in the data tracker. Excuse me one moment.
It is listed in the charter, even though it's not listed in the milestones.
It is in the charter.
It is mentioned in the charter.
So my question therefore is, we need an OAM document. We have an OAM individual draft. Therefore, working group, you need to review this. So authors, are you asking for adoption, or I mean, do you think this is ready for adoption, or are you looking for more feedback first?
No, I don't. We don't think that this is ready for adoption. And Carlos will join us as an author for this draft. So he will also contribute in the next weeks. So he has proposed to do that. So that's not ready, but the core of the document is there, basically.
Okay, understood. So I might suggest working group have this document is available on the data tracker. Read it, give the authors feedback, because although they're not asking now, I can imagine maybe after the next IETF they might be ready to ask for adoption. So please help. Okay. Any other questions?
And I think it's not a question, just a comment on my part. In addition to sort of rejiggering the milestones, in much the same way we need to rejigger them to account for the fact that we don't have a separate requirements doc, we've got a technology draft. Instead, we probably need to also add a milestone around OAM that's a little further out. And we could definitely use your input, Fabrice, and authors about sort of a time frame.
So just as a heads up for the working group, Eve and I are looking to just align the charter milestones with what we're actually working on. It's a bit of admin, but of course we will inform the working group of what we're proposing before we actually make the decisions.
Right, and it's also that it's, as I was saying to Rick, the OAM work is, or the need for OAM is mentioned in the charter, even though it wasn't initially, it's not in the initial set of milestones. So we just need to align them.
And before our AD jumps to the microphone and panics that we're completely changing the scope of the group, we're not. We're just trying to make sure that our milestones match our charter, match our actual capabilities of delivering. So we have, look at that, we have 9 minutes exactly for open mic. It's almost as though we planned it. If no one has any further questions for Fabrice, thank you very much to all our presenters. And yeah, the queue is open for general discussion. Oh, George just appeared and then disappeared. Yeah, the queue feature is fine. Otherwise, I shall sit quietly and drink my coffee because we have Meet Echo for another 10 minutes. Go ahead, Pascal.
Hello. Yes, if we have a minute or two, I would like to come back to the architecture and the plan to proceed. So we kind of gave ourselves like 4 weeks. I just published 05 as I said I would. And what I would love to see happen now is share the GitHub with Lou and Rick, invite you on the GitHub and start working on the changes that both of you have suggested. And for that, since we have a very, very tight time, I guess we would need to have a few sessions between authors to agree on what gets in, and then we would notify the group that we're ready, basically.
Well, the reason I said 4 weeks is because I have learned from experience that when chairs say we will ask in 12 weeks, then it gets forgotten. So if you think 4 weeks is too soon, that's fine. We can leave it for longer.
No, it's too late. What I would have loved You know, if you ask me, what we would do is adopt the damn thing. And as part of the adoption procedure, you chairs would ask me to invite the 2 new authors. So when I publish the 00, the only change would be adding authors, so reshuffling the authors. And from there, we would form a kind of design team, or just the authors, but it could be a design team, which would be wider than that, I don't know, to actually do what Lou and Rick have asked. Now, since it's Lou and Rick who know what they want, it could also be done just between the authors, copying the mailing list on what the progress is. But I don't see a good reason, if we know, if we know where we're going, to wait for 4 weeks. I mean, the work happens as a work group document anyway.
Okay, so my suggestion for the 4 weeks was not about rate of work or additional authors. It was simply because the current draft wasn't available until this morning or today. There had been no opportunity for the working group to read the latest version before making a decision on adoption. So the 4 weeks was purely so the working group participants get a chance to read the draft you have just published and consider whether this is the correct direction for the architecture and framework for RAW.
Yeah, but that's exactly what the call for adoption is, right? You're not saying we adopt it today, but if you're saying, hey, we give you in 4 weeks, it's just like even too much. If considering the tight schedule we have and the fact that you and Lou identified some more work that needs to be done, so we could do it in the personal submission, but I mean, why not do it in the working group document?
Oh, well, I'm trying to split the two, and I see you're in the queue, Lou. I'm trying to split the two questions between does the working group adopt the document and is there more work to do on the document? I think they're two different questions and can be addressed in parallel. My question is to the working group is this document the correct document to be adopted by the working group? Is this the RAW architecture and frame? Is this the document we want to start the RAW architecture and framework work with? And the reason I picked 4 weeks is
question to the mailing
okay.
list.
Well, we can
I know
because
I'm
you said
queue.
you didn't want to be.
Wait. I know I'm jumping queue, but I did have my hand up.
Go on, Lou.
There's a reason we have 2 week cutoffs. You just published it today. It's in the middle. It's just the start of the IETF week. Even though we're virtual, it's still a busy week. I don't think it's reasonable to say I published it 5 minutes ago. Can we adopt it? And the 4 weeks is sort of reasonable given a week for the IETF to take place. Next week, I know there's a whole bunch of people. I know we're not traveling, but maybe we're taking some vacation time next week. It's a popular time for that. So real work happening in after that seemed sort of reasonable to me, and I figured that's part of the 4 week comment. I don't think it's reasonable to say I published it today. Can we adopt it today?
My reason for thinking 4 weeks was it runs us up to the start of the Christmas break. It's make a decision this working year. And I agree, Lou. I mean, I'm very happy to do a show of hands now, but it won't be binding because people need a chance to consider these things.
Right, but be clear, I never said we adopt it today, right? I said
no.
We just discuss it on the mailing list. That's what a call for adoption is. And we take the time it needs, right? And if Lou says it's 4 weeks, yes, why not? Yes, I'm anxious that it's too close to Christmas.
I'm just making the cutoff before Christmas. I imagine most people will make their mind up sooner, but if I say 3 weeks, then it's, Eve, what's your thought?
Oh, I was just going to say, I was kind of going to agree with what Pascal just said, which is, okay, it's been posted. People, please read it. Let's aim for getting comments in. Obviously, it's going to be hard to do that this week. So, and it may be hard to do it for people in the US next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday. But I do think that sometime before the end of the year and before the Christmas holiday, the December holidays, is perfectly reasonable. And if people can do it sooner, great. So let's take it to the list and set our expectations for some time in early December. And if it has to be mid-December, great. As long as we aim for this year, it will be terrific.
I'm in agreement.
The adoption.
If you make it a call for adoption, then people will take it seriously. If you make it like, please review, it's going to be I may do that if I find the time.
No, sorry. It's going to be a call for adoption before the end of the year, sort of mid-December is my proposal. So please review, read now. The call for adoption will be this year.
And actually, I'll go one step further, Pascal, which is to say that when we issue our minutes to remind people about the reviews that are needed, because we have a couple of these documents that are waiting for adoption. So we'll tie those things together.
Yep. Okay, so we are in the last minute.
Thank you, everyone, for staying awake. And having such a rich conversation in the audio and in the chat session. And Ethan, as always, thank you for all of your note-taking. I
haven't checked CodeMD. Thank you,
I
Ethan.
did.
Oh, well
yes,
done.
I checked it.
Thank you very much, note-takers, Ethan, whoever. Thank you very much for getting up early or staying up late or being at a sensible time because you live in Asia. And we might do an interim, have no idea as yet. Otherwise, we will see you all or speak to you all at IETF 110 and or on the mailing list. Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Eve. And we'll shut it down. Last time, Meet Echo just died instantly, but it still seems to be open.
I think it's giving us a 5-minute grace
5-minute
period.
overrun. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Okay.
thank you very much, everyone. Okay, cheers.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing people in person sometime.
Yeah, one day.
Someday. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.